You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Chris in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, TV shows, games, books, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 666, a Father's Day special, where tonight we're going to be talking about Sheev Palpatine, everybody's favorite daddy, baddy daddy, as I put in the show notes. And with me is one of our own baddy daddies, Chris. Chris, welcome back to the show, of course. How are you doing, sir? Happy Father's Day.
I'm doing well. Happy Father's Day to you. I'm having a good day.
Yeah. Did you get any, you snag any Father's Day loot, Star Wars related by chance?
Not a lot, but you can't really see it. But my daughter got me a Darth Vader hanging.
Oh, I see something hanging there.
Stained glass thing. Yeah, you can't really see it. I'll bring it out another show, but it's a real cool stained glass piece that I need to find something to illuminate it from behind. But for now, I decided to hang it back up here on the wall, just above BB-8's head.
Yeah.
So that's that. I got that pretty good. We had a good meal and yeah, we're good over here.
Yeah, same thing. I got well, no, I didn't get that, but I got like the Grogu Lego set, like the really big one that comes with like the little carrier and all that.
Yeah,
that was I have to put that together. I mean, it's just gonna go on the stash of Legos. I still haven't put the ghost together, but I got that one, and I don't know, a couple other Star Wars things as well. But it's been a really fun day. I got to go down to San Antonio, visit with my brothers and my dad and family. So. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And, you know, again, what says father better than Sheev Palpatine? So we'll get into all that here in a second. But before we do, how about some shout outs and thank yous to some very special people?
Sure. We would like to give a shout out and thank you to our Patreon members, are now part of the tribe members. Krista Martinelli, Will I Am, my girl Paisley. I got a Brad Feeling, Rita Reborn, Jacob H, Josh C, Uncle Leon, Sharkman Dan, Alejandro Jackson A, Daz Davies, Risk Bayless, Danny P, Mike Borda, Dante, aka Utini, and Kat, aka Vader's Girl. Thank you for our now part of the tribe members. Now we'll move on to the Delusions of Grandeur, our highest level on Patreon. We got my guy now. This is Rod Racing, Rob G, Steve C, and my girl Vanessa S. Thank you so much for your support of the Cantina Cast. If you guys are interested, if you're listening here and you're not a Patreon member, you can support us on Patreon by going to cantinacast.com/Patreon or patreon.com/the Cantina Cast. And you can sign up. You don't have to, you could be a free Patreon member, or you can choose to donate a monthly, however much you want in the levels that are available. But we would love to have your support there either way. So please support us there. And we'll be eternally grateful. And it allows us to continue to bring you guys this amazing Star Wars content.
Yep. No, well said. And I think as far as programming notes, what do we got coming up here? We got a couple shows that we've scheduled already.
Yes. So this coming Tuesday, June 23rd, is going to be a Patreon episode, and we're going to cover or break down the first two issues of the Galaxy's Edge Echoes of the Empire comic book series, which is kind of like a companion piece to the changes that we've actually talked about on the show to Galaxy's Edge in Disneyland, incorporating the original trilogy characters. So this is, like I said, this is like a companion comic book series. And the first episode features our favorite Jedi, Luke Skywalker. So be sure to join us on Tuesday, the 23rd for that show. And then coming Sunday, June 28th, we're going to continue on with our breakdown of The Mandalorian and Grogu, and we're going to talk about the Hutts and the Hunters. So join us for that, and so we can break down one more piece of this great movie, The Mandalorian and Grogu.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about the comic book, especially from your perspective as someone who's been to Galaxy's Edge a number of times, because, of course, I've never been, but there's so much in there that I know when those comics came out, people are like, oh, this is so cool. There's, callbacks and that sort of thing. So it's going to be fun to kind of get your perspectives specifically for me anyways. And then that Mandalorian and Grogu show, the Hutts and Hunters, that one is, we were trying to think of a way to kind of group some of the other remaining characters. And it just made sense that we'd probably focus on some of the bad guys, which is going to be this is going to be the bad guy show. And then we'll do maybe at least one more where we focus on, the New Republic characters, all the good guys, even the Unzellans and those sort of things. So that'll be at least two more shows coming. Don't forget, we have the free posters that we're giving away for those. And so if you're interested in entering for one of the free posters on either one of those shows, those will be public shows. All you have to do is send us a question for us to answer on those episodes. It can be via email, hello there at cantinacast.com, or you can hit us up on social media or on Patreon if you're a Patreon member, free or not. You guys can send us questions however you'd like, and we'll get you entered. We'll draw somebody's name before we do each of those shows. We'll announce a winner, and then we will mail that off in a big safe tube. So congratulations to our winners already, and then hopefully you will get one as well. So, okay, I think that's all the business that we need to cover. And let's talk about Palpatine. Let's talk about fatherhood. It was one of these things where it was like, ooh, episode 666 is coming up, and I definitely want to talk about Palpatine. This was not planned. Like, I was not planning for it to be and land on Father's Day 2026. It was just happenstance. It was the will of the Force, however you want to look at it, but it all kind of just worked out. And so it really kind of changed the angle a little bit because, originally it was just going to be Palpatine. I thought, well, he is a father, right? So why don't we start there? Let's talk about just, I guess, fatherhood in general for Star Wars, for you personally. And the one thing that I would say is, like, when you think about fathers in Star Wars, Palpatine is like nowhere near the top. And that's not even like Vader for me is up there because he is the father. He was a terrible father, right? I guess ultimately he did the right thing, but he wasn't a good person. Let me say that. I wouldn't say he's a bad father, but he wasn't a good person. But even still, because it was so pivotal with Luke Skywalker, he does rise up to the top when I think about fathers in Star Wars. Palpatine is not up there, and yet he is a father. He, there's plenty of other ones out there, but we'll get into all of that here a little bit with like Dathan and his relationship with him as well. But I guess when you think about like fathers in Star Wars, like who comes to mind? And I guess your thoughts on Palpatine as a father, given that we got that in The Rise of Skywalker. Specifically, we got that in The Shadow of the Sith book by Adam Christopher.
Yeah. I think, I've said since day one of being a Star Wars fan, as an adult, I should say. Of course, when I was a kid, it was all about starships and lightsabers. But as an adult, Star Wars is a story about families, and it's a story about family.
Right.
And so obviously, from an original trilogy perspective, Darth Vader is the looming father figure over the whole trilogy. However, there are other father figures in the original trilogy. If you look at Obi-Wan and how he essentially mentored Luke, he's a father figure. We can't forget Uncle Owen. Yep. Owen Lars, essentially raising Luke with Beru on Tatooine. He is also a father figure. Then we can go as far as maybe from a certain point of view, Yoda, and how he was a fatherly type figure to not just Luke in training him on Dagobah, but also Obi-Wan back in the days of not the old Republic, but the Republic, I guess. And so then we continue on to Return of the Jedi, where when we first see, the individual that we're going to break down today, aka the Emperor. And the Emperor really in Return of the Jedi just seemed like the bad dude, the big bad, the final boss. That's who Emperor Palpatine came across in Return of the Jedi. We don't see that father figure type of behavior until we get probably to episode 2, right? Episode 2, we see him, we understand he has a rapport with Anakin. We know via the novels and whatnot, comic books, that they do have a close relationship. And, Anakin even says in episode 2 that he's looked out for me since I got here. Yeah. So, that's where the mentorship, aka being a father figure for Anakin, shows up. And then we really see it in episode 3, but it's providing mentorship, but he's really manipulating him, which unfortunately some fathers do. with their
Yeah.
children. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? So
Yeah.
it follows that trope. And then of course, he cares for him, kind of brings him back to health, kind of. But he wants to use him as a weapon. He's not doing it out of the kindness of his heart. Honestly, I think, if they talk about, Sheev Palpatine's heart, it's probably smaller and more black than the Grinch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And yet he refers to him as like my friend.
my friend,
He says that. It's
exactly.
like, get out of here.
Exactly. Exactly. Then if we take that and then we go to the sequel trilogy, obviously we don't have any interaction with him until The Rise of Skywalker, but he has a granddaughter,
Mm-hmm.
Rey.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
in turn means he had a child, or had a child that or was a child that was like a clone of him, and that particular offspring, I guess we would say, produced Rey. And so, that was he was kind of, again, like he was doing with Vader in the prequel trilogy, with Rey, was trying to be that mentor figure, but behind the scenes he's actually manipulating her. And again, unfortunately, fathers do that. Some fathers do that.
Yeah. Some
So
parents do that. How
some
about that?
parents do that, absolutely.
Mhm.
So is he the stereotypical father figure that I would associate with other Star Wars characters that are no?
Right.
Does he provide some of that fatherly type of mentorship and false care? Absolutely. So unfortunately, you
Yeah.
have to place him as a father figure in the Star Wars galaxy.
Yeah, I mean, he comes into the conversation, of course. He has to be entered in the conversation. Whether or not he's a prominent character that we want to talk about as a father, usually not the case. He is the devil. He is pure evil. We have no reason to believe there's any part of his heart that has any light whatsoever. We can get into the lore of him in just a minute here, at least from the Legends perspective. We don't really have a lot on the canon side of things, but if you look at like the Palpatine or the Darth Plagueis novel, there's a lot of information there. And I think a lot of that is carried over, at least spiritually, and how the characters portrayed on the movies and the comics and everything else that's come afterwards. But, you think about fatherhood, just quickly before we kind of turn our full attention to Palpatine, there are a lot of great fathers in Star Wars, and it wasn't always the case. When you think about when the original trilogy came out, we didn't have a lot of father figure role or characters. It was literally like Vader and then, like you said, Owen Lars. It wasn't until we got into the prequel trilogy and we had Jedis, we had kind of like the brotherhood relationships, you had the Qui-Gon stuff going on there, right? It started introducing more, softening. We get into a lot of the books and things got better. And by the time we get to the Rise of Skywalker, we've got a lot of other ones. Rogue One did a great job with Galen or so, and just his love for Jyn and that freaking speech that he gives to her when, revealing that he had, put that, that weak spot in the Death Star, right?
Yep.
For his Stardust, and she's crying, and you're thinking, oh my God, this guy, actually sincerely loved her. It was just amazing. I mean, we had Bail Organa, again, but he didn't come into the prequel trilogy, so we had to wait for him to kind of spin around. I mean, we knew that he was probably a good person just because Leia turned out to be just an incredible person all around. So that was kind of implied. You think about I think about Star Wars Rebels, and I always throw Kanan Jarrus in there because I mean, he wasn't necessarily, he was kind of a father. He was definitely a father figure in every possible way that you can think of. I mean, he had two young kids, teenage kids that he was rearing, as part of the Phoenix Squadron guys. And then there was just great moments in throughout that series when he would just do things like a father, or he would get frustrated because of the conversations that he was having with them, and he was very telling of what fatherhood is really like, right? It's the good and the bad. And it's what you do with that ultimately makes you, I think a good father, at least, and definitely within the eyes of your children. So, so all that to say is we've had, thankfully, a lot of good fathers. We've had, thankfully, a lot of good mothers. We've had a lot of great parents. And I love this idea that fatherhood can come is more than just blood. It can be love as well. And we've got some really great examples of that. Okay, now that's all the good stuff. The bad part is we've got Palpatine in the mix now, thanks to the Rise of Skywalker, like you said, with Rey in there. It is a good point. He is definitely, grooming Anakin Skywalker, during the prequel trilogy. And do I want to think that he ever gave him any sound advice or good advice out of the kindness of his heart? No, probably not. But to Anakin, without a father figure in his life, like he didn't grow up with one, he's got this relationship with, Obi-Wan Kenobi, who it's more of a brother than it is a father figure. I mean, it probably starts off that way. And quickly, as Anakin starts to grow in power and becomes more mature, you can see it in the Clone Wars where they're kind of butting heads almost like brothers rather than like, father and son. And so there's still that void to be filled. And here you go, you got Palpatine who's prepping him up and posturing him and telling him how great he is. And really, it's all manipulation, of course, which we'll talk about when we get into like some of the, I guess, the abilities and some of the character traits of Palpatine. But then when you fast forward to his actual fatherhood, it's very hollow. It's lifeless, for lack of a better term, and no pun intended. It's lifeless in the sense that he has Dathan created. And for anybody that's not aware, he does have what they call a strand cast clone that was created. And we'll get into the purpose of that a little bit later, but there's no relationship there. He was allowed to stay there. The kid was allowed to grow up there on Exegol for a number of years before he finally escaped. But for the most part, it was not it wasn't like a good relationship. It was like it was just another tool, another way to seek what he ultimately wanted, which was immortality, life, preserved kind of thing. So it's very hollow, but out of all that, spawns Rey, and the Rey and Dathan relationship was sincere. It was, something that, he really loved his kid. So good things did come out of that. But so that's kind of like in a nutshell, I think, for fathers. The only other father that comes to mind, I was going to say this real quick. The other father that comes to mind is the father from the Mortis gods.
The Mortis arc, yep.
Yeah.
And Clone Wars.
You can't not talk about him because he is the father of the Force, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't know, but just want to throw that in there. Neil's dad with the man cave. I forgot that's what Alex just said.
Yep. I saw that.
I can't pull up the chat. I don't know why. I can't click on it to pop it up for some reason. It's not working for me. Did you do that?
I did that.
Okay, yeah, I can't. I click it and nothing happens. So awesome. That's really great. Thank you. So Vader's girl's got some in there. She says, my favorite dads in Star Wars are Vader. Oh, Mando. Yeah, Mando, right?
Yeah.
He's definitely been somebody recently here that's become a forefront father figure. Bail Organa, Galen Erso, and Darth Revan. Okay. Yeah, that sounds like Vader's girl. Alex also said Window. I think, the Neil's dad. So he said Jango Fett as well as one of the cool dads, I guess. I mean, he was loving to his son.
I think so. He seemed like he was concerned. He was like, hey, like when they were about to get found out by Obi-Wan, he was like, okay, pack your things, we're out of here. Where he could have just been bye. You could stay here and be raised by the there in Camino. But no, he took his son with him. So I would call him a good dad.
Yeah, he's a good dad. I mean, he lets the kid get in the cockpit and go fire anytime they're killing people. So, I mean, I don't know how better to express your love for your child than, mowing down people in your ship.
Exactly.
So yeah, if you got other fathers, feel free to throw them in there in the chat tonight if you want, and we'll call them out. But we're going to move on and kind of focus now on Palpatine. And maybe let's just start kind of in the character traits of Palpatine, since this is a character spotlight. I guess I don't want to just read from the script here because I have a couple of thoughts in here, but just outside of the script, when you think of Palpatine, like what are some of the first words that come to mind to describe the ultimate jerk face here?
Now, for me, and this goes back to when I first saw him in 1983 as a 7-year-old boy watching, excitedly watching Return of the Jedi. When he came off of the shuttle, he looked pure evil. And that's the words that I describe him to this day is pure evil.
Yeah.
Now, I might add, I would always start with pure evil, but also someone who is brilliant. I think what we saw, I know a lot of fans were not real happy with the whole political drama, political maneuvering that encompassed the prequels, but I thought it was necessary because it just showed you how intelligent Sheev Palpatine was, and that would be the third word I would use to describe him after pure evil is brilliant.
Yeah, he's manipulator, evil, a con man of sorts, right? Definitely, we've talked about this on the show many times, but he was definitely playing the long game, right?
Yep.
A lot of that came from his force abilities and his foresight ability, which we'll get into when we kind of touch really quickly on his force abilities. But a lot of that came from that, right? Being so overconfident, which, as Luke called out, as being a weakness. And a lot of that was predicated on this idea that he had, or predicated on the idea that he was able to kind of see things well in advance, better than a lot of other people. And so from that, comes that sense of arrogance about him and the confidence, that comes about from it. So, I would definitely say he is I call him like a master strategist, right? Tactically he was. We got to, in the movies, we only got to, that whole everything's going as I have foreseen it happening, and the tactical stuff where he's, the Star Destroyers are told to hold back until Palpatine has given them the orders, right? That's all done. They're running through a playbook that he's created because he knows that he needs to manipulate Luke Skywalker and build up that tension, let that evil start to swell, so he can ultimately get him to switch over to the dark side and kick his dad to the road, and be the right-hand Sith that he had always wanted and never got with Vader, which we'll talk about too in just a second. So, but those are some of the traits. His motivation, outside. For Palpatine, it was always about life everlasting,
right?
This is, of course, that came from Darth Plagueis, from that line he says during the Opera House scene. His personal life, which, just quickly, because we're talking about the traits, because I think a lot of his traits stem from what he grew up with. Again, a lot of this is going to be, Legends and the Darth Plagueis book, although I know George Lucas had a hand in writing all that, or at least was very close to it, I would say. He's a character that killed his parents, both his dad, his mom, I think he had siblings as well, but he kills everybody on a ship, because he's told, when they tell him, hey, you need to stay away from Darth Plagueis, he's a bad influence and you're completely different now, kind of thing. He didn't want that. And so to kind of prove himself to Plagueis, he just murders everybody. I think he force chokes his dad at one point, kills them all, and then goes back to Plagueis and is like, hey, look, I'm yours, dude. I just killed everybody, wiped them out. Essentially he wipes out his entire family. If you think about it, the same thing happens with Anakin Skywalker. Anakin wipes out his entire family, to kind of show his allegiance to his master. But a lot of where that all stemmed from, from that moment on, and just his upbringing there, the way he was into politics, and he had a lot of financial backing after he killed Plagueis because he was a banker. It really put him in a position to play that long game and to manipulate not only the people around him, but governments and the galaxy at large, and then ultimately, culminate in this, oh, my life was almost taken. The Jedi are the bad people. I need to be, put in a big power place at this point. All of that, again, was by strategy and by plan, but he never lost, sight of the end game, which was life eternal. And that's not specific to Palpatine. Like, I think we've talked about this too. So many Sith Lords or dark side users have always been in search of this. It's always escaped them. And for him, because Plagueis had some ability to do so, it was the one thing that he knew that he wanted to keep, because once, what's the point of having a large empire and having an entire galaxy to yourself when you're going to pass, right? You want to keep that forever. And so that was the ultimate prize for him. But
just immortality and the continual process of obtaining more power.
Yeah.
I think those are the two main goals for Darth Sidious.
Yeah. One Up versus CPU said wrinkly and electrifying as two words to describe Palpatine. I didn't include those as well. There was another trait that I think it came out in, I want to say, I forget now what book it was, but they talked about, it was the Aftermath series. It was the Aftermath, Chuck Wendig. When he wrote that book, there was one point in there where they just talked about how Palpatine was in search of the source of the dark side. Like he felt like there was the dark side was coming from somewhere. And I think the quote was the universe, it was coming from, quote, the universe beyond the edges of our maps. And so he was in search of the true source of the dark side. When you think about that, and you think about like his obsession with like dark magic, like the witches, and then we have that whole thing with the cauldron during Rebels, where he's reaching into the world between worlds. I mean, it was like he had a fixation with like the cult and like dark magics, and just a scholar in terms of the dark, in terms of the Force, really, right? Even beyond that. But he did, at least according to that book, he was in search of this source of the dark side. It was stemming. He could feel it. He could feel that call, and knew that there was some source of dark side out there and that he was in search of it. He never found it. I think for me, in my headcanon, what he was looking for was the Peridia, right? Or the world, the Mortis gods, right? Because he had the son and the daughter. The son was the dark side, Bogan, and you had the daughter, Astra, who, and maybe that's what he was feeling. Maybe he was feeling that out in Peridia or wherever that world existed. But that's how I always interpreted. But I think it's important to acknowledge that he was a collector of things, a collector of knowledge and tomes and artifacts and research and history. We see a lot of that too when you play Battlefront 2, the solo adventure. Luke is going around and he finds this like bunker, and it's just full of artifacts and things that Palpatine has collected. And he continued to do that after the fall of the Jedi. So I think a lot of that too is really, I mean, it's a really great trait because, he was so dedicated to it, and he ended up using a lot of that stuff. It wasn't just because, I don't know, he wanted to have it. He was trying to better himself and become more powerful, as powerful than anyone else, that had ever existed before him.
Yeah, he was just in search of power. And we all know, being around the Star Wars galaxy for a long time, that those type of trinkets, your holocrons, your wayfinders, those hold keys to more advancement in your aptitude in the Force. So, of course, that's something that Palpatine's going to be interested in, so that his power can grow.
Yeah. So that was kind of those are, I guess, his traits and a lot of where he came from. And the way we kind of broke this show up is we've got essentially 3 phases of his life, and there's some overlap here as well. It's not perfect, but I kind of called the first one, which was just the rise to power. And this is everything that a lot of what we talked about in that pre-Phantom Menace era, and that takes us all the way to Revenge of the Sith. After that, we have the Galactic Empire, Emperor Palpatine, if you will, formally, and that is post Return of this Revenge of the Sith, all the way up until Return of the Jedi, meaning that's where he dies. And then we have kind of like this second, we literally have the second coming of him in this Force Order era of his life. And that is starting with Operation Cinder, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And that goes, of course, until his death again in The Rise of Skywalker. And so we'll talk about all of the rest of Palpatine kind of in those kind of 3 phases of his life. But why don't we start with Palpatine and his relationship with Anakin Skywalker? I know you've already touched on it already, but I guess what were some of the more defining things about that relationship? What did you see, in the Phantom Menace, or not Phantom Menace, but Attack of the Clones, and then the Revenge of the Sith, where I think much of the biggest manipulation is, and we can certainly talk about the opera scene, because I think there's a lot there too.
Oh yeah. When we see their relationship in Attack of the Clones, it is, you're right, it's not as fleshed out as it is in Revenge of the Sith, but you see the seeds of manipulation that Palpatine starts to lay in Anakin Skywalker. You see him offering guidance like, a father figure, right? But he's just kind of I don't think he's beginning. I think this is where we first see it in any type of visual media of him, essentially doing this. But then you also see him do the same thing with others, like, the Jedi Council and the other senators and whatnot. And then there's some that are not keen to what he has to sell. Like, Bail Organa as a senator is one. Yoda kind of has his doubts. I still, you know, and I'm sure most people believe this, but that like eyebrow raise every time, uh, or not every time, but that one time Palpatine said something while everyone was sitting in his office. He said something of interest, and like Yoda kind of looked at him kind of
Right.
weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so he knows what's up. So I don't think he was susceptible to a lot of the manipulation that Palpatine gave out. But he did unfortunately fall for some of it. Um, so, he was essentially using Anakin as a pawn, as he was using everyone else, the other
Mhm.
senators, Jar Jar Binks, Amidala, all of those people he was manipulating. But I think the difference is that he did it a little bit more from a mentorship standpoint with Anakin, because he knew what he was going to become. He knew he needed him to accomplish what he wanted to accomplish. So that's where we saw it happen, or for the first time at the beginning of episode, or not at the beginning, but in episode 2.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I'll joke, and this is kind of funny, but it kind of starts in the Phantom Menace when we get the line of "We shall watch your career with great interest." Even back then, he had already targeted him as somebody that he was going to watch as a potential, rule of two person, and that was ultimately what he was doing. Like he was, it was grooming and it was manipulating and all that, but for the sole purpose of making himself more powerful.
Right.
We talked about we had Adam Christopher on when we broke down Master of Evil, and if you haven't had a chance to listen to that conversation, there is something that happens in the book, and it's just a line that Adam Christopher threw out there, and it really struck me because I had never really put a lot of thought into it. I mean, it was there, and it's kind of apparent when you hear it, but it was just something that was like, oh, he was really kind of hitting it a little bit harder in that book, and that was this idea that the Sith in that rule of two really wanted the most powerful people. And I know that's implied. The rule of two was such that, it was a culling of like the weaker people. And you always wanted the strongest apprentice to have, be with you, or the strongest acolyte to be with you, because that in turn would make you more powerful, right? You were only as powerful as your acolyte was. And so when Anakin Skywalker starts to rise in power and he learns about, oh my God, this guy has so many midichlorians, he's got all this crazy potential. He starts to see all that in the time from the Phantom Menace to the Clone Wars. And then there's tons of examples in the Clone Wars, Attack of the Clones, and then the Clone Wars series. This was something that was like, he could not wait to get Anakin to flip, because that was really going to be the missing piece. They were going to be very powerful. That was going to be somebody that would really challenge him, make him grow stronger, even stronger in the Force, in the dark side. He couldn't wait to do that. What happened was everything went completely wrong in the sense that Anakin did not make it through. I mean, he failed, and he only lived because Palpatine rushed to his rescue. At that point, when you think about it, just chronologically, he was really damaged goods. He was a liability in some ways, and he had nobody else to go to because he just had Anakin wipe out every single, at least there's like 8,000 now alive, but at the time he wiped out all the other Jedi. And so he had no one left. So he had to, this was like there was no backup plan. You know what I mean? Like he only had Anakin Skywalker. And so then he was stuck with, well, I got to put this dude back together because I need somebody for this rule of two. And a lot of that spurs in that like kind of flows into and really destroys his relationship with Vader. Like he treats Vader absolutely horrible. Not that he would have treated him like great, but when you think about the way he talks to him once he anoints him as Lord Vader and he tells him to go do his bidding, there's almost like a level of I don't know if respect's the right word, but he definitely I would say he respects him like as a tool. You know what I mean? He acknowledges that Anakin is powerful and he can do some amazing things, and that he is the right person to be and worthy of being next to Palpatine. When Anakin gets his limbs chopped off and he becomes this more machine than man thing that's a little clumsy, and just that whole view completely changes.
Mhm.
And there's tons of examples. A lot of it is in comic books and books, honestly, but there are so many examples of just the way he treats him, and partly because he knows that if he does all that, it angers it angers
Right.
Vader, I should say.
Right.
And that anger, he would feed off of it,
Mhm.
right? So it was it was beneficial for him to do so, but it really did take a horrible turn for him when Vader did not, or I should say Anakin Skywalker didn't turn out to be the acolyte that he really wanted at the time.
Right. I mean, don't get me wrong. Vader was still extremely powerful.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And Vader still, for the most part, when Palpatine sent him to take care of something, he took care of it.
Mhm.
But did he reach his full potential? He couldn't at that point.
Right, he had limitations.
He had limitations. Even though you're so powerful in the Force, and then in the Star Wars universe, you have these robotic limbs that they can add to your body if you lose one, and you just continue on. I think the way that he fell to the dark side, that is what kind of limited him. Palpatine did have a role in that, but yeah, he was still tremendously powerful, and I do believe still looked up even as Darth Vader, the mechanical Darth Vader, and like you said, how badly Palpatine would treat him at times. He still looked up to him as a father figure or a mentor type figure, even though we've read in certain comics he was thinking of ways to kind of like try to overthrow him. Even we could even go all the way back to episode 3 where he's pleading with Padme to like, hey, stay with me, we'll make things the way they want, I can
Right.
overthrow the Emperor.
Yeah, exactly.
He tells Luke that together we can overthrow the Emperor. We know that's on his mind, but even so he still looks up to Palpatine.
Yep. Yeah. I don't want, before we move on, I know I kind of we've already jumped to, his death and all that, but I just want to roll back just a little bit and talk about the opera scene. That is for me, it's one of the better moments in Star Wars, like period. Everything about the way that scene is acted, the way it's written, the visuals, the audio,
Right.
you got that ambient music playing in the background. You've got the Plagueis song or the I guess the Palpatine Plagueis theme going on there in the background. If you didn't know, behind the scenes, I think it was Ian McDiarmid. He was like really sick when he did that.
Yep.
And so a lot of that actually kind of came across
out,
as
yep.
setting that tone in the way that those lines are being delivered. But it's just one of those perfect things that everything just kind of comes together. So much has been talked about with regards to whether or not Palpatine was the father of Anakin Skywalker or not. And a lot of this stemmed from the comic book, the Darth Vader comic, where they kind of did this one image and everybody's mind was completely lost at that point. We have no real reason to believe that Anakin was truly the birth by Palpatine. If you want to go down the path of Anakin was born of the Force, well, he was, but born of the Force as a countermeasure or as a result of Palpatine and Plagueis manipulating the Force and trying to create life, that kind of thing, you can certainly call it that. But there's nothing that says that he is the father. That's never been the case. In fact, if you really think about it, and we broke this comic back, almost, I think it was like 6 years ago now, 5 years ago when it first came out. Our take on that was, look, that image that you see with Palpatine standing behind Padme, and he's got his little magic fingers going, and
behind
she's pregnant. Shmi, sorry, not Padme. Shmi, and he's got his magic fingers, and he's doing something. You're in the mind of Anakin Skywalker. In that whole panel, and throughout all that comic book, you're in the mindset of Anakin Skywalker, and when he's thinking about the things that scare him, that is one of the things that frightens him. Right? It's not a confirmation. It's just that he's thinking about there's all kinds of other stuff on that panel. There's other things. It's not just that. But his worry is that what if he is my father? Like, what if he did create me, kind of thing. That was really what Charles Soule was trying to get across there. Anyways, I do want to talk about that opera scene though, because that, and plus you think about the visuals of what looks to be like an embryo in life being created.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. I've been saying that for over 20 years now.
Right.
And everyone's just saying, no, that it's just balls of water. And
no.
They're jumping between the two like a Cirque du Soleil thing. No, there's symbolism there.
Yes.
There really is.
There really is symbolism. Yeah. But that is like one of that is the ultimate move that he makes to finally get Anakin to cross over, because he knows how much he cares about Padme. He throws this idea out there about being able to maybe even keep people alive, right? Because Anakin's already had the visions of Padme dying. And so that's really what entices him and allows him to finally give him the line of, not from a Jedi.
Right.
You can't learn those things, kind of thing. So, but I guess, I don't know, I guess your thoughts real quick on the opera scene, the manipulation that happens there. And I guess anything else you want to add to that before we move on?
So first of all, I think that is arguably the best scene in the entire prequel trilogy.
Oh, wow.
I from how it's written to the importance to the story to how it's acted. I thought it. I thought it was the best. I think it is the best. In my heart, I know it is the best. And also, I believe that from that moment on, Anakin knows he's Darth Sidious, but he's in denial. I believe
that's a hot take. I like
he
that.
knows, that he's in denial. He waits for Palpatine to admit it before he's like, okay, crap, I need to go get some backup.
Right. Yeah.
But I think from that point on, he's in denial because, yes, I'm going to assume, even here in the real world, most of our elected officials are like highly educated. They come from Harvard and Yale, and they're Oxford,
Ivy Leagues, yeah,
Ivy League, and all that stuff. So and since Lucas essentially took aspects of the real world and put it in Star Wars, I mean, it's all over the place, especially politically. You would assume that their elected officials are the same. So, I have no doubt that Palpatine is very well educated, very well read. But the detail that he had about Darth Plagueis and his plight, especially the fact that he knew that his apprentice killed him in his sleep, again, that is, I think for me, Palpatine was bringing that up to see how he would react.
Yeah.
And if he reacted harshly and been like, all right, I'm out of here, he knew he would have a problem with Anakin Skywalker. But when Anakin sat there, again, for fear of losing his wife and his unborn child, sitting with someone potentially giving him a solution to that, he had no choice but to stay there. And that's when Palpatine knew he had him.
Yeah.
And I think from that point on, Anakin knew in the back of his head that he was a Sith Lord. He just was in denial until he actually admitted he was. And then, like I said, he was like, oh, crap, and then tried.
It was too late at that point.
It was too late at that point. I think from that point on, everything was for show.
Yeah.
He was under the impression that the Jedi would spare him and he would go to trial. So he would still do his, he would still go and serve justice, but he was still around to let him know how he can keep Padme alive. And then, of course, once Mace said, yeah, no, I have to take him out, that was it. That was the final step for him turning into Darth Vader.
Yeah. I like that take. I hadn't really heard that one before. And I and if you think about it now, I'm like, oh yeah, the way Anakin looks at him when he's like, he's kind of got his head turned like, wait a second, something's not right here.
Right. Exactly. It's like, how would you know, for as educated as he could have potentially have been, again, I haven't seen anything. I haven't read anything that even speaks about his upbringing and his education. But again, just assuming he's a high ranking politician, the majority of them are well educated from, highly regarded institutions. How would you know something like that about the dark side, about a Sith Lord, and especially the fact that he was killed by his apprentice?
Yeah,
a
little too much detail.
Anakin had to have known.
Yeah, and it didn't help that Palpatine had his head turned over and then finally turns his head and goes, "Not from a Jedi."
Yeah,
I mean, it's like, okay,
was that movie, like The Exorcist? Turning slowly like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I think, like I said, once he saw Anakin's reaction to his story, what he was telling him, he knew he had him.
Yeah.
So we got one comment from One Up versus CPU 64. He said to retrace back that actually Plagueis wasn't asleep, that Darth Sidious didn't kill him in his sleep in the book. I haven't read it, Albert. I know you probably have. Can you? What's your take on this?
No. Plagueis, yes, he killed him in his sleep, but he was already like badly injured and wounded. What I was referring to was his dad. His father was definitely awake when he was killed by Palpatine.
I see.
And both of those happen in the book, in the Darth Plagueis. If you haven't read it, James Lucerna is the writer. It is actually one of the better like Star Wars novels that have come out. And like I said, Lucas did have a hand. I know, depending on who you talk to, they'll give you varying degrees of how much involvement he had. Everything from it was my story to not his story, just there to say yes or no, approve things, disapprove things. I don't know that there's anything ever been official. I know some people definitely know, but nonetheless, it's a great book. The only problem that I ever had that book is the only problem I ever had played with the book was the fact that I just I couldn't get past a lot of the banking stuff. There's like some economics, and it has to be there because of Plagueis and his alter identity that he was using to get money and all that. That was really difficult to get through because it was, I had to get like pen and paper and write stuff down. But outside of that, like the actual like core events and everything goes on, it's actually really good. So go check it out if you can. Yes, he poisoned him. I can't click on the comics, so you can throw them up there. Okay, so let's so that's kind of there's only one more thing I want to talk about, and this is just I want to talk about his force abilities. I would say force powers, but his force abilities, just to kind of touch on it. Like I've always really liked his combat style. It's a very unique style. It's in the Revenge of the Sith, it's muted a lot because in that fight that he has with Mace Windu, there's a lot of close-up shots, and I think we've talked about this. I mean, my sense is they just couldn't get the choreography to speed up the way they wanted to, or maybe it was meant to be more methodical, but there were way too many close-up shots of that fight scene. And it was great because you got to see, Mace Windu's face and you got to see Sheev's face a lot, but it didn't really give us kind of any kind of scale in terms of how big that fight was. In the book, it does. Like, by the way, Matt Stover's Revenge of the Sith novelization is great, and it gets into more detail there. But I like the Clone Wars and his ability, the way he fights in the Clone Wars. Like that is very unique. His combat style, he's always upright. His weapons are always kind of down at times. It's very like, it's almost, it is manipulative. Like he really lulls you into thinking that he doesn't have his guard up, and he's absolutely evil. Like, I mean, the one that really comes to mind, of course, is when he does kill Savage Press in front of Maul. And that whole battle while he's fighting both of those is a great, great battle. But I think the takeaway from all of this is that Palpatine was somebody, when you talk about like the most powerful force users that have ever lived, he is up there. Like, don't get me wrong. He's way, way up there because of his force abilities, his midichlorian count. I don't know. We don't have any official record of that. But just what he was able to do, which we're going to get into here. But then you talk about, not only did he have like the non-combative force abilities, but he had the skills and the prowess to use lightsabers, not just one, but dual wield them at that. I mean, he's way up there. Like he's up there with the Mace Windu's and the, who was the other one? Infila, which was one of the Jedi trainer from the comic book. He's like up there with the best of the best when it comes to using lightsabers.
Yeah, and there have been some talk about that the duel in Revenge of the Sith between Mace Windu and Sidious is Mace was that good of a swordsman, and I don't remember the style that a Mace Windu practices with a lightsaber. I know it's
Vapid.
Vapod.
It's Legends like too, by the way. But
yeah, exactly. But people still swear it's real, so we'll run with it.
It's fine.
But it's that style that like teeters you on the fine line of falling to the dark side or not. But that style is very methodical, very like it's like a slow developing football play. He has his fights mentally choreographed and knows where every parry and every slash is going to come from. In turn, he moves. His strikes are deadly, but he moves a little slower because he puts more thought into the strikes. And that's where I've read that, that's why their duel was kind of unimpressive because there was to show that Mace's style kind of overtook what Palpatine was trying to do.
Okay, I can see that. It's
but then,
definitely less
yeah,
performative than the other
absolutely.
ones, right?
And then I saw Ian McDermott, a week ago from today over at SpaceCon in San Antonio, and he had a panel there. He didn't say it there, but I've seen him say in previous panels that he would quote Christopher Lee when he would talk about that particular lightsaber duel with Samuel L. Jackson. He's like, my mind knew where to go, but my body couldn't do it. Yeah. And that's what Christopher Lee said about playing Dooku and dueling, Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen on both episode 2 and episode 3 is that, if I could go a half step slower, I could make those moves and they wouldn't have to bring in a stunt double. But because they want everything to be crisp and they want it to look as good as possible, I can't do that because my head can do it, but my body can't. And that's what Ian McDermott would echo a few times when they would bring up the duel with Samuel L. Jackson, Mace Windu and Palpatine.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's no shade on them. Like I totally understand it and get it. I think they've done it, like I said, in Clone Wars. Same thing with Dooku. Like he's had some incredible fights. And by the way, I threw it in the comments. So I meant to throw Dooku in there when I talk about like the greatest lightsaber duelists, although we've got some now from the High Republic that were really good too, but at least in the prequel, OT, and sequel trilogies, those guys are definitely up there. I mean, it would make sense that Dooku, of course, would be a really good one considering his master was Palpatine, or at least he learned from Palpatine.
And you know what, his Jedi master was Yoda,
right? Yeah. But so that kind of skyrockets him to up at the very top. But I didn't want to leave that out. Lightsabers is definitely a thing. His Force lightning, I think, is probably it's almost kind of like his signature move.
His signature Force ability. Yeah, I would agree.
We see it in, of course, for the first time in Return of the Jedi. We've seen it. You play video games and he's always got Force lightning. We know that when he was when he had Vader, and whenever Vader did something wrong, I mean, it was Force lightning. Whenever Darth Maul did anything wrong, he got Force lightning. Yeah. It was a way to punish them and make them angry so that he could feed off that anger and power himself up, if you will. Right. And then all this, it even carries all the way over until we get to the Rise of Skywalker, where we see him display like this ultimate Force ability power that brings down literally thousands of ships in the air. Yeah. Right. So, and then we got, it was, if you think about like the character traits or some of the abilities that were inherited from Palpatine through Rey, she got that moment where she used Force lightning too. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like it is in the family, it's in his genes, if you will, but definitely one of his more signature abilities. And I think I can't, outside of that and like the foresight, being able to see things before they happen, those are probably his two biggest abilities and two great ones, honestly. Probably the second one more than the first. But
I would say another ability that he had was the ability to cloud the Jedi's foresight of their own. Because in episode 2, he's like, Yoda was like, the dark side clouds everything. Impossible to see the future is. That's Sidious. That is Palpatine doing that. Yeah. So true. that is an ability that cannot be ignored. We talk about the Force lightning and how powerful that is. I can honestly say the whole, on Exegol, where he essentially throws the most amazing Force lightning up into the attacking resistance ships and the civilian ships that came to aid the resistance. That is a top 10 Star Wars moment for me. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of Rise of Skywalker, I thought that was done beautifully, from the dialogue before he did that to, and it's not like Ian McDermott had to do much. He was behind makeup and he just had to raise his arms, but I thought the way that he did it was perfectly. And then the sound, it rivals the seismic charge sound. It kind of like it sucks all the sound out of the picture, and then boom. I thought that was one of the greatest scenes in all of Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, it is and I don't mean this in like the surfer dude term, but it is an awesome display of power.
Absolutely, yes.
One that we haven't seen, on screen ever, really, to that magnitude. And that just kind of shows like how powerful he was, because at that point he was, quote, all the Sith, right? He was channeling all the power of the Sith that had come before him, dark side power incarnate, if you will. He was doing all that. And so how does it manifest in somebody like Palpatine? Well, it's going to manifest in something like Force lightning. So great use of power there. There's one other power too, and it doesn't get talked about a lot. I think in Legends they really did speak about it. Canon, I don't know that they've ever really identified it, labeled it. I could be wrong because I haven't really looked into it too much, but he was able to hide in plain sight.
Yes.
You got somebody who is pure dark side, pure evil all the time, can't turn it off. And yet he's able to suppress it to the point where people like Master Yoda and Mace Windu and, Ki-Adi-Mundi and some these people that sit on the Jedi Council are in next to him within proximity of like 2 meters, like 3 feet or whatever. And they don't sense a single thing. You know what I mean? Like he's able to hide all of that and do it at will and still, be and still have dark side thoughts and moments. And I get it. Like for them, they're feeling it. It's part of that cloud, I think, is what they're feeling, right? They just can't pinpoint it. They can't identify where it's coming from. And yet it's like right in front of their face. That is incredible power to have to be that. Because if you think about, there are other moments in Star Wars lore where somebody, I can feel the dark side, or where something's happening now, or I have a bad feeling about this. And yet it never happens for them, right? He lives years. And this even predates him as part of like, as Palpatine, when he was evil and doing stuff, growing up, right? I'm kind of leaning into the Plagueis novel again a little bit here, but he was able to kind of suppress that. But that's an incredible ability to be able to do that with so many Jedi around him, and in his position, working as closely as he did with the Jedi, and having somebody like Anakin Skywalker, who was incredibly powerful, at his right-hand side for day in and day out for many years. Yeah, you got to give it to him to be able to do something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a reverse. I can compare it to like a reverse superhero movie, whereas in superhero movies, the hero is the one that has a secret identity. Here, the villain, the overall villain, the final boss of this entire saga, has a secret identity, at least until he doesn't need it anymore.
Right.
And how he pulled the wool over everyone's eyes. I mean, and it's not just the Jedi, it's essentially the entire galaxy.
Oh yeah.
That has to be a dark side force ability, and arguably his most dangerous one.
Let's talk about just quickly before we kind of move on. So I think we've touched on the political manipulation and what he's done there. I think one of the better examples recently was in Andor, and setting up what was the name of the planet to kind of be like the bad guys, or the propaganda machine that he would use, right? That propaganda machine that he would use that for
Gorman.
For Gorman, right? Being able to manipulate not only just the political people, but then the populace, the general public at large, right? You think about Edie, Cyril's mom, and how suddenly she had a different view of that because she was reading the hollows and the propaganda news and all that. I mean, it was a big machine that was, he was behind, and all that was being orchestrated. But I want to just kind of talk about the rule of two, because it was kind of a loose rule if you think about it, because you had Palpatine, who at one point had, in the Plagueis novel, he had like a couple people that he was kind of, in addition to like Darth Maul, he had like 2 other people that he was working with, and I forget their names now. And it's not important, but it wasn't just a strict rule of 2. It was like, I'm going to have a couple of urns here in the fire, and some over here in this fire, and some over here in this fire. And if they find out, cool. If not, that's fine too. But he was really trying to get the best one to kind of step forward, right? It was almost like, Darwin's law. Whoever, Darwin's law, like whoever could live and survive, and that was going to be the ultimate victor, and somebody that would he pick up. But he allowed Count Dooku to have Asajj as a as an assassin, not necessarily a Sith, but at the same time he had Darth Maul out there. He had Anakin that he was looking at one point. So yeah, he didn't follow it as strict, like by the letter of the law. But I think he had, I guess, that wouldn't be. Sorry, I was thinking of somebody else totally. But I guess anything you want to add to the rule of two, I guess, in the way he interpreted or used it.
I think I agree with you. I think he probably used it. He followed that rule very loosely, but I do believe he stayed true to what that rule
The intent and
was that
purpose.
there were only two. The intent and purpose of that rule
Right.
was for two Sith Lords at a time, a master and apprentice. And in all Star Wars, it's always been that. I mean, yes, we can go back to Darth Sidious and Darth Tyrannus. Then we bring in Asajj Ventress, but she was never anointed a Sith.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? She was just a Sith acolyte, if you
I
want
think
to call
she was a
them
Sith
that.
assassin was her title back when she first came out.
Yeah, so not a true Sith Lord. And then we look at post Revenge of the Sith, the empires in power. How many Inquisitors have we had? And they're not there. They practice in the dark side. They all have red lightsabers and they're all hunting Jedi, but they're not Sith Lords. So I think that's where he kind of bends the rule. Is like, okay, there's only two Sith Lords, but we can have these dark side Force users still do our bidding and be dangerous tools for us to take care of stuff that we really don't want to get our hands messy.
Do you think if any one of those had ever like bubbled up to the surface, like being really powerful, do you think he would have said, okay, it's time to switch? Like, Vader, you were great, but I've got this person over here. I don't know, the Grand Inquisitor, let's just say. I'm just throwing some out there.
Okay,
If he suddenly became, rose to power, became more stronger, do you think he would have like dropped Vader and chose him in favor of him? I think he would, honestly, but that's just me.
I mean, if there was a situation where the Grand Inquisitor could take out Vader, Palpatine would have orchestrated a situation where he would give him the opportunity to prove that. I think that's the type of manipulator Palpatine is. And he wasn't going to just say, okay, I'm going to kick Vader to the curb and then just bring in the Grand Inquisitor as the next Sith Lord and my apprentice. I think he would have set up a situation to have those two come into conflict, have them battle it out, and whoever is the victor is the one who remains.
Do you think he ever wanted or had an eye on Ezra?
That's a good question.
He knew who Ezra was. I mean, he was trying to manipulate Ezra was. In that final season?
The final season. Potentially, I think it could have been a situation where he's like, okay, this guy has the potential to rise. And he sensed what Darth Maul sensed in him, that there is a little bit of anger and fear in him, which could, similar to what Maul is doing now with Devin in Maul Shadow Lord, trying to manipulate the little pieces of what it takes to be part of the dark side and cause them to grow. I don't see Ezra as an all-powerful Jedi. I think he will be a great Jedi by the time we're said and done with his character. But a shout out to Iman and Fadi. But I think Ezra in itself, I don't think he would have risen to that level of Jedi to where Palpatine would have taken notice and said, okay, he could be a potential replacement for my apprentice.
Okay. So he was really just manipulating him. You think he was just manipulating him, using him for the purpose of the world between worlds more than anything else? Yeah,
correct. I believe so.
Okay, that's fair. And I don't disagree. Like, as much as there were times during Rebels that I thought, okay, is he going to like try to get him to come over and all that? And of course, none of that ever happened. But I think if he had that, if he saw that in him, he probably would have taken advantage of it. Like I said, because for him, Vader was a liability. Like, he wasn't. You're right. Like, he was super powerful and he did everything Vader Palpatine had asked, but he was on a respirator at times, and he was tired all the time, and just not the.
He was always in his bacta tank when he should be out doing something bad.
And so
he was lounging in his big, humongous castle on Mustafar,
sulking. because his wife was
Sulking.
dead.
Yep.
Boo hoo hoo. Get over it, dude.
Yeah, get over it. You killed her.
You killed her, right? So, all right. So that's kind of the rule of two. Why don't we do this? Let's move to, I guess, the second phase of his life, which is Emperor Palpatine. This is post Revenge of the Sith and all the way through Return of the Jedi, because life is good. Like
life is good.
He's like in charge of the whole. He's got the whole galaxy, under his fist and in his hand, right. And there's just this ocean for him.
The only thing I could say is that obviously we don't see him have to come out, at least, and I'm saying from a actual visual media perspective, we don't see him have to come out and do anything until Return of the Jedi to deal with Luke. But I think that if we start from, the fall of the Republic, the Empire taking over the galaxy, I think from that point, he takes a step back. He shows up for the Senate meetings and then takes a step back, and he's just playing the pieces behind the scenes, using the brilliance that I was talking about earlier for the majority of that whole period of time. I know there was a story, and correct me if I'm wrong, if this isn't a canon story, if it's still a legend story, but there was a story where like Vader and Palpatine got marooned on a planet with like a bunch of dangerous animals or something like that, and they had to fight, and he had to help Vader fight his way through.
Yeah, that was well, that was Legends.
It was Legends. Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure.
Lord? I forget now which book that was. It was one of the Legends books, but yeah.
And so other than that, I think that from that point on, he really didn't have to do much from a physical standpoint or a force ability standpoint. He just used his brilliance to manipulate the galaxy the way he wanted. And when he needed something done, he had Darth Vader. He had the Galactic Starfleet. He had the Inquisitors. He let them get their hands dirty. He kept his hands clean, again, until he ultimately had to, and it led to his demise when he had to take care of Luke Skywalker. So I think for the most part, he just sat back and used his brilliance. I think that sums up that particular period of time for Palpatine in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like a lot of once he had the power after Revenge of the Sith, and we talk about it, it is kind of easy street, but he is thinking ahead. Like he's not just sitting back, on the desk, hands behind his back, going, "Man, this is great. What to do next?" He's thinking about, okay, now what? Like, what are the next steps that I need to do? Part of it was the freaking Senate, right? Yep. He had to get rid of the Senate because the Senate was, it was a delicate balance, right? Palpatine didn't just go like scorched earth and wipe out the Senate and start killing people left and right. That wasn't his thing, right? He was constantly thinking the long game. He was more of a lawful evil kind of character when you think about like character alignments, right? He wasn't chaotic evil. He was lawful evil. And so that meant he was trying to work within the constraints of the system that existed because he needed people to come on board. The galaxy is very large. And until he had enough, he would never do this. Like he would never have enough, in my opinion. But unless he had like enough force out there to really just go out and slaughter people and have them run things and run the galaxy, the right way, or competently, I should say, he was going to need the help of some of these folks. And so he needed to get them on board. They kept bucking and bucking and bucking. And so we have years and years and years where this never, he was just finally fed up with it. And that's when we finally get to the New Hope, when Tarkin comes in and says he got rid of the Senate. Like he's done with it.
Yep.
It wasn't doing, he probably had rose to power at that point enough. He had the Death Star. So like, hey, you know what? If your planet doesn't want to play along, I don't need your planet anymore. We'll just get rid of it. We'll wipe it off the map and, not have to worry about it.
Yeah, it's typical Palpatine. He utilized the unit of the Senate till it served him no more. And because and they were the ones that gave him the ultimate power to rule as emperor. He said, okay, you're done. Back to, like not picking off, senators one by one until the Senate was gone. he was doing it lawfully. Yeah, he was doing it lawfully, but was it morally correct? No. I mean,
No, right.
we saw in Andor season 2, he would take out senators who openly talked bad about him, or dissent. Exactly. And it was about to happen to Mon Mothma. Paisley has a good comment here. It was like, I wonder about Mon and how she interacted with Palpatine. The truth is, from what I've read and from what I've seen, she hardly had any. I think Palpatine hardly had any interaction with any senator because he didn't really care. He was ultimately going to get what he wanted. He was just using them in certain areas that he needed them. But yeah, he would go after those senators who really talked bad about him. And Mon Mothma was next. Luckily, Cassian was able to, with the help of Luthen, get Mon out there, get him back to Yavin 4 so that she could ultimately lead the rebellion. But yeah, that sounds strangely familiar.
Yeah.
So, and it's unfortunate. But yeah, it was lawful, but it was not right by any means.
Yeah, if you want to know more, like honestly, about kind of what's going on in the background, I'm going to plug this real quick. But this is Reign of the Empire. Alexander Freed. This is part 1, The Mask of Fear. Part 2 is coming out. I think they've already announced it. There's 3 books in the series, and it's really about Mothma, Bail Organa, and Saw Gerrera, and how they're kind of dealing with the Empire. But it does get into a lot of Palpatine's not necessarily a spotlight character or like a main character or anything, but it's how they're dealing with what we just talked about,
right?
Like the pressure that Palpatine's putting on, systems and politicians, and how they're trying to maneuver through all of this, and with a ever-moving goalpost and things changing constantly. At the same time, trying to rally people behind their causes. It's great stuff if you like that. But definitely, I would recommend that to get into that if you are. I was trying to, I'm plug the book and I lost my train of thought. The other, we talked about, I guess during this time, oh yeah. So he's thinking about that, right? He's got the Senate's thorn in their side, that little pesky Organa family, just want to get rid of the whole planet someday. And then on top of that, he is thinking about, okay, so, I'm not looking the best these days. I'm getting up there in age. How do I preserve my life? And we know that as far back as just almost right after the Revenge of the Sith stuff, he starts doing the research of like, how do I extend my life? And this all turns into ultimately what becomes Project Necromancer, right? To help him kind of keep him alive, and the whole cloning thing and all of that, using the technology that he got from the Kaminoans. This is the stuff that we got from the Bad Batch,
right? Omega and whatnot.
Yep. All of that's in play, right? And he's Grogu, right? That is something that is very at the forefront of his mind, something that he's thinking about, something he's strategizing over, experimenting on. I mean, there was all kinds in the Clone Wars. We come to find out, or not Clone Wars, Bad Batch. They were doing all kinds of experiments on different planets to figure out how to make some kind of a clone vessel for his life force to be transferred into. Right. In the background, we also have him working with his what would become like the Sith acolytes, what's his that one right-hand man, Yupe something, I forgot his name already.
Oh yeah, from
he's in Revenge of the Sith, or he's in he's in Return of the Jedi.
The two cohorts that he has,
his counselor people.
Yeah.
I know you can look it up, or somebody can look it up. But he's working with them because they're kind of spearheading the whole initiative. That eventually leads him over to Exegol and getting that to hold Eternal Empire, Sith Empire, Sith Eternal, I think.
Sith Eternal,
yeah, trying to get all that going and running. And then on top of that, which we'll get into in just a second, he's already putting into with he's got a very small group of people, very close group of people that he is talking to about something called Operation Cinder. And that is in the event that he dies, here's what I want you guys to do on my behalf, as because for reasons which we can talk about. So we'll get into that in just a second, but he's got a pretty good run here. Like there's no really opposing force until that freaking Skywalker kid shows up and blows up his Death Star, and then everything changes, right?
Exactly.
I mean, his whole world's turned upside down in a matter of just a year and a half, and to the point where he dies. in Revenge of the Sith or Return of the Jedi. And the beauty of it is, right, the poetic justice of it all is the fact that the one person that he hated and manipulated and wanted to be his first-hand man and all that, and ultimately becomes the person that is not only a result of his death, but the direct result of his death, because he chucks him over into that the core on the Death Star.
That reactor core pit. Yep.
So there is, again, it's poetic justice that it is Anakin Skywalker, and the one thing that he's not able to see because of his confidence is that he thought Vader was gone. He thought Anakin Skywalker was long dead, buried. He'd done his best to ensure that person was no longer there. And up until Luke Skywalker came out, there are very few instances outside of his own personal time, Vader's personal time, where Anakin just didn't exist. Like when he was out doing the Vader stuff, he was Vader. He was killing people, choking people, didn't care what it was. Think about like the Kenobi series. I mean, he's killing that poor child in the middle of the street and dragging him with the Force or whatever he was doing to that one kid. I mean, he was evil. Like he was doing all kinds of horrible things, but it was his love for his son. That's one thing, again, that Palpatine never considered was ultimately his undoing. And so, I mean, I just, we all like it, but I do just love that it was, again, poetic justice in that term. So let's talk about, anything else you want to add to, I guess, during the Emperor Palpatine rule? And there's a lot that goes on. Don't get me wrong, but we didn't say this at the very beginning of the show, but there's so much that happens. Like, we could do multiple series of shows on Palpatine and not get through all of the lore and talk about all the big highlights.
He has a layered
so I know I'm leaving out a lot of things. Yeah,
absolutely.
But anything else you want to add before we kind of move?
The only thing I have to add, the only thing that I would have to add. I mean, you hit to close the book on that particular area of Palpatine leading to his death and Return of the Jedi. You hit all the talking points that I would have said. What I want to say is Lucasfilm, Dave Filoni, we need a Project Necromancer fleshed out. We've gotten the high level explanations, but let's get something to flesh this out, because it's kind of after the end of Bad Batch, it's kind of been like left there. And I want to see the details of what this freaking project is. I know the overarching goal of it was to essentially be able to create host or clone Palpatine to keep him alive forever. But I want to know the details, what had to be gathered to do this, what scientists work on it to try to get this going. And we know science and scientists play a big part in a lot of what the Empire likes to do to create tools of power, like Galen Erso and the Death Star. So I that's the only thing I have to say is I want to see that whole part of the storyline fleshed out a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think there's room to. Like, it feels like there is some bandwidth there for them to do it. I mean, it's very intriguing in terms of what Project Cinder is, what ultimately Project Necromancer is. We got pieces of it even in the Ahsoka series. It's still going on there. So yeah, I'm with you. Like, I'd love to see more of that happen, and whether they do that on television, on screen, comic book, whatever it is, I don't care. They've certainly teased us enough about it, and with not a lot of details. And my take is that because they've not given us details, knowing Filoni, he's timing it. Like, he's planning this out. We probably will get more details. I'm just not sure how it plays into kind of the overall Filoni verse and what we've got on the roadmap, because right now we don't really have a roadmap. So
yeah, we don't. That's exactly right.
Okay, so let's talk about his his final phase of life, where he dies officially. And at that point, when he dies, his soul, his essence, that spirit or whatever you see come out of that core reactor, then takes off and heads out to Exegol. Because at this point, he has found Exegol. He's got people out there doing research. On Exegol, there was a Sith Lord named Darth Noctis, which I think Lauren and I covered. It's a short story that came out from Cabin Scott a while back, but we did cover it. And Darth Noctis, and this is canon, was doing the same thing. Like she was in search of life eternal. I won't spoil the story. If you have a chance to read it, please read it. It's a great, great little short story. I think it's George Mann and Cabin Scott that write it. But anyways, we do learn that on Exegol, there is like a lab. There were other previous Sith Lords that just through their research all went to Exegol. So like all roads lead to Exegol in terms of like where you need to go to, prolong your life. And so ultimately Palpatine gets led there, and so his whole soul transfers over, his essence transfers over into Exegol, and it goes into these strand cast bodies that because he's so powerful, his body's kind of decaying rapidly. And so they have to create another one. They move him to the other one. And a lot of this is not like official. Like we there's probably some assumptions that we make based on what we've read. But nonetheless, he's there. And while he's there, this is where he finally gives birth to his son and and don't get me wrong, there's no mom, right? It's like all done through cloning. Most of the clones that they create don't live and die immediately, but there is one that actually lives, and this is the character named Dathan, which he names. This kid's alive. He's not able to. He has no force abilities. Like they understand, like through the science of it all, the cloning of it all, they come to realize that okay, yes, Dathan is a clone of Palpatine. He is a strand cast. He is a host that we could move the force into, but he has no force potential, right? There's nothing that would make us believe that if we did that, Palpatine would retain his force abilities. And so really he's a bad batch, like it didn't work.
Right.
But for whatever reason, and this is the most intriguing thing for me about that, Adam Christopher's book, for whatever reason, Palpatine decides to keep him around. And if you want to be cynical, then the reason's because we have a story for Rey. But he keeps Dathan around, and Dathan grows up on Exegol. Like this little kid grows up on Exegol, and he's witnessing all of these horrible things that they're doing, sacrifices and rituals and whatever else, dark side users on Exegol do. And eventually he realizes like this is bad stuff. Like, Palpatine doesn't treat him like a father. He keeps around. He acknowledges that is his son because he's a clone, and that's about as far as it goes. But, he grows up being cared for either by himself or some of the people that just the advisors or people that work there or whatever. And at some point he realizes like, this is just not a good environment. I need to get out of here. And so he leaves Exegol, escapes from Exegol. Eventually he runs into Rey's mother, which is Miramir. They have a kid that turns out to be Rey. Uchia Bestoon, if you guys remember him from The Rise of Skywalker, is then sent out to go kill Rey and this offspring and all that. And I think I'm trying to remember now. He may have wanted Rey because he either wanted to make sure that because she was part of the lineage, she might be force potential, have some force potential, and so maybe she would be a good host of it, or a good host for her, because that's what happens. And by the time we get to the end of The Rise of Skywalker. And that's when we get the whole thing where they hide Rey on Jakku and they take off, and Uchi finds them, kills the mom, kills the dad. And that's where everything goes cold until Lando and Luke get back on trail. Okay. Anyways, that's the whole story that happens there. The takeaway from this is he was a father, and he had Dathan, and Dathan was a good person. Like he was a good enough person that he realizes like all this is really bad, and decides to leave, and then of course has a child. And the way he loves his child, they absolutely, like when you read that book, Shadow of the Sith by Adam Christopher, they absolutely 100% love Rey in every possible way. The way they talk to her, the way they rear her, the way they educate her, the way they care for her. I mean, they make the ultimate sacrifice by leaving her there with that ugly dude, Unkar Pluck, just to preserve her life. So there's no reason for us to believe that they were bad parents, and they definitely were really good people. So I just want to throw that out there, but that's kind of what happens here at this point. I don't know. Any thoughts around Dathan? I know you didn't read the book, but I guess hearing at that time, because it was very controversial,
right?
I think when Dathan came out, and a lot of people just saw it as, okay, it's just an excuse. It's a reason to have Rey have parents now. And for a lot of folks, it didn't pay off the way they wanted to when we get to The Rise of Skywalker. But I will say, when you read Shadow of the Sith, Adam Christopher does a really good job of connecting all the dots and making it fit. And it doesn't feel no pun intended. It does not feel forced. But what do you think?
So I would agree with you, because I thought that whole storyline was not fleshed out well at all in the movies themselves. I haven't read the book, but I've heard good things about it. I've heard specifically what you just said, is that whole, the whole Dathan arc and him having a quote unquote child, using the Strandcast, that is gives more context to what we see in The Rise of Skywalker. So that's definitely something I want to check out, because that was one of the things that left me wanting more. Because I was like, okay, you had this, you call him, he's a clone of you, you call him your son, and then you in turn call Rey your granddaughter. What's the backstory behind that? Because that's all very plot convenient, if you want to use a term.
Yeah.
So
I get it.
Yeah, that's something I definitely want to check out.
So yeah, someone asked if it was the Dark Legends book by George Mann. Sorry, that was One Up versus CPU. Yes, it is Dark Legends. The name of that short story is called A Life Immortal. It is it's really good. I don't want to spoil anything, but when you read the ending, you're like, oh crap, that's not what I was expecting. So
right.
And it's a short story, but take a look at it when you can. Plus you have Darth Noctis, who has a sickle lightsaber. So she's got a red lightsaber, but it's curved like a sickle.
Ooh.
That's cool. And there's actually some artwork by Grant Adams. I forget the guy's name. Dang it. Sorry. Too many names in my head. But Grant Griffin. He does a lot of the art for the High Republic. He's been on a roll. He's been on a lot of great art. But he does some amazing stuff. But he did a little portrait or picture of Darth Noctis as well, which is great. Okay, so that's kind of the Nathan thing. So that's kind of happening. He is a father. Congratulations, and one of the worst people ever, because he didn't show any love for this kid whatsoever. Again, it was just it's really weird why he kept him around.
Yeah, it just ends to means. I mean, that's what it was. That's all he was. Yeah.
I think he kind of alludes in the book that maybe he had some sympathy for this character, for Dathan, and that's why he kept him around. But he definitely was very interested in Dathan once he found out Dathan had a child who was force sensitive.
Right.
Okay, so the other thing that's really big in this First Order post Revenge or Return of the Jedi is Operation Cinder. This is one of the more telling things of Palpatine, like his hubris, his I wouldn't say egotism, but what's the word I'm looking for?
No, I would say his ego, his hubris.
I'm trying to think of the word.
His narcissistic ways.
Thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
It is the most narcissistic thing that you can possibly think of. Right. So anybody that isn't aware, in the event that he died, he told a very small group of people that no one is worthy of having anything at all. Like, in other words, everybody that was against him has to die, and everybody that was with him has to die too. Like, everything needs to be burned down. Everything needs to be blown up. And it's really cool because when you play the Battlefront 2 solo player game, you get a lot of information on Operation Cinder. You see firsthand these big satellites that are floating around different planets, and they're just bombarding and blowing things up. We get a really cool reference to this in The Mandalorian, when what's the character's name? The bald-headed guy, when Mando takes his mask off for the first time, I think in season 2. If I'm not mistaken, maybe it's season 1.
The Bill Burr character.
Yeah, the Bill Burr character. I don't remember his name. When he's talking to that guy, and he's telling him, like, you wiped out all my dudes, right? He finally, and he's having that confrontation. They were working under Operation Cinder. That's why all those people were wiped out and killed. And for his character, he doesn't understand it. Like, he doesn't really understand why they did all that. And that's why he's so pissed off. Why would you kill your own men? Those were my friends, kind of thing. But Operation Cinder was exactly that. He wanted, because he was dead and the Empire failed him because they didn't keep him alive, he wanted not only, again, the galaxy at large to be destroyed, but then everybody else had to die too. Star Destroyers, planets, bases, everything had to be wiped out. It was orchestrated. It was pulled off. Like he had all these kind of like robot androids that had his face on there. I forget what those were called. But there's a lot of details that go in, and a lot of it comes from the video game, which is canon, by the way. Battlefront 2, the solo adventure, is all canon. But it just goes to show you like how narcissistic he was. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not alive and no one's worthy of living now that I've died. So go ahead and do all of this. And for the most part, a lot of what he asked for was done. A lot of what the Empire had was suddenly destroyed, torn down, and a lot of it had to be rebuilt under this First Order kind of thing. So now, any thoughts, I guess, on Operation Cinder?
You're right. That's the result of an ultimate narcissist, where he's taking his ball and leaving if you don't play the way he wants to play.
Yeah.
Again, but there is also a ulterior motive. Obviously he did survive, and he was building something at the time even bigger than what was left over of the Empire in hopes to rise to power again.
Yeah. Yeah, which was the First Order, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what would ultimately become like his
Final Order,
Sith Eternal, and the Final Order. Yep, all of that came into it. And that leads us into kind of his rebirth. I mean, eventually, they do get his body transferred into this clone that we see at the very beginning of the Rise of Skywalker. I mean, we kind of skipped over the whole Snoke thing. That was those were some of the failed strand casts that were being created, and they did have Force abilities, but they just didn't live very long. There was a lot of problems with them. That's why you see the tube, or like the tubes of multiple Snokes at the very beginning of the Rise of Skywalker. And that was really his only means to try to manipulate Kylo Ren or Ben Solo to become Kylo Ren. And so he has this relationship the entire time in this post era where he's grooming, Ben Solo because of his potential. He doesn't know why Solo has the potential that he does. We come to find out that it's because of the dyad, right? Him and Rey together, and that's why they both have that they're so powerful in the Force. Later on, he learns all this, and that kind of love it or hate it, the way they kind of pull all that into the Rise of Skywalker, you can make sense out of it. You may not like it, but you can make sense out of it. And that's when, he knows Rey's powerful. He knows Solo's powerful. He's been manipulating Ben this entire time to try to get him to kind of come over, and I don't know what his intentions were there. It isn't until the very end of the Rise of Skywalker when those two come together, and suddenly he's healed because he's able to pull in from their force of that dyad, and he realizes, oh my God, this whole time they've been a dyad in the Force. It rejuvenates him. He's rebirthed. He's no longer like on that machine, the Deus Ex Machina thing that he had. Right. He no longer needs that. And that's when we get him being able to display his newfound potential and power by taking down all of those starships in the sky. What he wasn't counting on was that this dyad of the Force, and through their kind of, Rey being able to channel all of the Jedi that have come before her, taking him out, and in return, her dying, never saw that Ben Solo would come back and give his life for Rey to live as well. So, it's messy, it's complicated, and a lot of it is because of the way those three movies were laid out. Right. But they had to bring somebody in to kind of tie all this together. But I think it works. I mean, I don't hate it. I can certainly make sense of it, and I get there's suspension of disbelief. But I think all of this stays true to Palpatine's character and who he is, what ultimately he was after, even at the very beginning of all of this, going back to the Darth Plagueis portion of it. It certainly makes sense. I think it tracks for the character, and don't have any real big issues with all of it.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with the whole idea of somehow Palpatine's returned. I have an issue is that this could have been fleshed out a little bit better if there was actually some coordination between the three sequel movies. But that's a different topic, right?
Yes, I would agree.
I just think it really left a lot to be desired because they tried to jam that whole plot point in Rise of Skywalker, and you only had 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
But I thought it was serviceable. I don't think it's the greatest thing. I don't hate it. I thought it was serviceable, and it kind of did, like you said, it kind of did what it needed to do to put a bow on essentially the Skywalker saga and call it a day. But that's why I'm asking, hey, give us a story. Whether it's a limited run TV show like an Andor, or maybe a novel, a couple of novels, comic books, flesh that out, because I know a lot of fans are interested in how that whole project came about, and the ultimate success and failures of that project. Obviously we had a success because they were able to keep Palpatine alive, like you said, with that machina thing that he was attached to ultimately before he had access to the dyad with Rey and Ben. um I want to know what was behind all that.
Right.
I just think that could be an amazing story. And really, there's two things I'm disappointed with the sequel trilogy. Everything else I could live with. One is we never got a scene with Luke, Han, and Leia together.
Yeah. I know.
And two,
Yeah.
the way Palpatine returned was never fleshed out.
Mm.
So I think I would absolutely welcome a story around Project Necromancer and the revival of Darth Sidious.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. Like there is a lot of story to be told.
Mhm.
What we have of what happens on Exegol is very, very thin. Most of it comes from that short story there. It comes from the Adams Christopher novel, Secrets, or not Secrets of the Sith, Shadow of the Sith. We've got some stuff in there. But there's a lot of road there. I think the problem is, there's a lot of story to be told for Palpatine specifically. Like I want to know more about the Snoke relationship, what he was doing there, how the Strand casts were working, how they didn't work. I want to know the ins and outs of what was successful with the Force, what wasn't. I have questions about why Snoke was able to do some things. Why wasn't that good enough? Why did he look different? There's all kinds of thoughts, things like that. A lot of it, like you said, is because we just had this discombobulated, 3 stories that were discombobulated and kind of stitched together as best they could. But it sounds like it's ripe for an opportunity for someone to go in and start kind of weaving this and giving us a lot of context and background to it. It does feel like we are kind of just putting this to the side. Like we're not going to touch this right now. Like
Right.
It's still hot.
Right.
People
But
still,
see, what's bad is that they're teasing us. They're teasing us with the Project Necromancer in the Bad Batch. They're teasing us with that same thing in the Mandalorian. And it just makes me want it more. I want it. It's not something that I could just suppress. It's like that project, because of Palpatine returning in the Rise of Skywalker, is a vital storyline to the entire Star Wars universe.
Agree.
It needs to be told.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but it does feel like they're kind of moving away from it. Like we get, what do we got? We got the Rey movie coming out. Hopefully, that's going to jump ahead. There's a time jump there. Are they going to touch anything with Palpatine? Probably not. We've got Starfighter that seems very unrelated.
One-off. Yeah, unrelated, one-off. Although, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, we know we will have a Jedi in there, so.
I had a dream Starfighter was the name of Rosling's character. I don't know if that's the case, like Skywalker, only Starfighter.
I also had a dream that Star Wars Starfighter was going to star Star Fox and his team.
No. What were you eating the night before?
I have maybe it was that cereal, the Grogu cereal that
Grogu cereal, right. I did that.
It caused me to have hallucinations. It was so stale.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's so to bring it back to Palpatine, I would agree. There's a lot of story that's there. There's a lot of things that we don't know about his interests, his motivations, and it's a character that it's not like Yoda, right? It feels like they've given us some of that information. If we were in the Legends era of stuff, like I guarantee you there'd be books and books of this stuff coming out, right? Unfortunately, we're not there, and they are kind of selective of what they want to tell, and there's only so much story they can crank out, especially when they've got their hands in almost now 4 different eras of Star Wars running at the
Right.
same time.
Exactly.
And we're starting to get a little wide in terms of the the breadth and depth of what we can actually tell. But I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it's a job for Adam Christopher next time we see him, and maybe at Celebration, or if he's listening and watching this episode, which
or you bring him on the show again. This time I will definitely take the invite and join, because
give me your best pitch on how we tie all this together. I'm sure he's got ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But here's what I would end with Palpatine. Like, his goal, like we said at the very beginning, like his ultimate goal was to preserve his life, and he did it. Like, and very few Sith or Force users can say that they successfully were able to live a life eternal, right, or come back to life, if you will.
Right.
Even in Legends, like, well, in Legends there's more because it's Legends, but even still, it's not like hundreds. There's like, I don't know, 10, 12 maybe. I don't know. I haven't really counted in a while. But there's, and that's over the course of thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of years, right? So it is a very, very rare thing that you have anybody find a way to have life eternal or come back to life. And he was successful. And so you got to give him his flowers for that. At least he did it. He just wasn't, it lasted all of about, 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
All said and done.
And I will say this, ultimately Palpatine was a very evil person, easily one of the most evil villains in all of cinema history. And I want to say, you're right. He did accomplish essentially what he was telling Anakin all those years ago on how to stay alive. Now, keep in mind, the way that he did it was very kludgy and required a lot of technology and a lot of failures and Sith, pseudoscience to have it done. But he did it.
That's called fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you, exactly. But ultimately at the end, he failed and he was incorrect.
Yeah.
Where he said, you wouldn't learn this from a Jedi. And then in the very last thing, or one of the very last things we see in the Skywalker saga, is a redeemed Ben Solo was able to bring Rey back to life.
Yeah.
Using the light side of the Force.
Yeah.
So ultimately, he's a liar and he failed. I can say, for as great a villain that Palpatine was, that was one of the other highlights from The Rise of Skywalker that I took from my very first viewing, was that Palpatine ultimately failed. And that's what I wanted to see.
Yeah. No, and I love it. Like, as the good guy, as a good, like, and I'm gonna call on the creator of this podcast, Mike Rondo, because we can't have a show about Palpatine and not have Mike Rondo brought up. But he was someone who, he loves Palpatine. Like his it's like his idol, his avatar. Anytime he did anything, we used to call him the Dark Lord of podcasting. But I remember we would have these conversations, and I always tell him the same thing. Like, Palpatine failed, dude. He's like, no, he's a great guy. No, he's an absolute failure. Like, and this was the lesson. This is what George Lucas wanted. He didn't want somebody to come in and be like, I did it, and look how cool being evil is. It's like, no, it's not at all what happened. As much as, he had some successes. I'm not going to say he didn't. And, he set out to do some things, and he got them done. He was very, very powerful. He deserves to be in the conversation of the most powerful Force users ever. But at the end of the day, to your point, he failed, and his face is ugly. So
and he's a liar.
Yep. So sorry, Palps, we love you, but
you had to go.
You had to go, buddy.
And hopefully we won't see you again. Hopefully.
No, we're done.
We're done.
I don't think we're ever going to see Palpatine again at this point. So maybe he, hold on, wait. Maybe he did at some point record something on a Sith holocron. And so, later down the road, somebody finds a Sith holocron, and there's
boom, they're possessed. And
no, God, no. I just meant he was going to like teach him something or more. But no, I don't want to go like,
no, I would
Coon kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would lose a lot of faith in Filoni if he brought him back again.
Yeah,
I would absolutely lose a lot of faith in him. I don't think it's going to happen. I agree with you. I don't think it's going to happen. But if it did, I would be utterly disappointed, and I would I would have some issues with Filoni if that happened. You hear that, Dave? Don't do it.
Don't do that.
Leave old Sheev in the ground or as dust or whatever he is now. Leave him there.
I guess he would be dust.
Stardust. Right? Because hey, there you go. Stardust. He is Stardust now.
Operation Stardust.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, again, happy Father's Day to those who celebrate. And if you ever need a role model of who not to be as a father, this is your man, Palpatine. So congratulations, Palpatine.
But One Up versus CPU 64 says he uploaded his consciousness into his cloak. Hopefully it's destroyed.
Yeah. That's like Momin. That's another comic book character that's canon from Charles Soule, where that Sith Lord uploaded his consciousness into a helmet. And if you put the helmet on, you suddenly became. So why not?
Darth Vader. Yep. Paisley earlier asked, is that why the Death Star destroyed Alderaan to get rid of, I'm assuming, Bail Organa? No, I don't think the Emperor had any say in destroying Alderaan. That was all Grand Moff Tarkin.
Yeah, it was.
He used
Yeah. It was
maybe
Tarkin's decision. No, it was Tarkin's decision. Yes. But when you look at the list of a-holes for them, like people that they really just cannot stand, like Alderaan is at the top of the list. And so when they needed a planet to destroy, like that's the one. Let's just go do that one. So it wasn't like directly intentional, but man, those guys on Alderaan were a pain in the butt. So let's just wipe them off. So that's kind of where it comes from.
I'm assuming that's why he was like, oh sure, yeah. I'm gonna use this to leverage, the princess.
Sorry, you were lagging there, so I wasn't sure you were talking. But you look at the way, Leia and Tarkin had many run-ins before, and that's why she is so candid. And I mean, that's just her personality in general, right? But the way she talks to Tarkin, it's so disrespectful. Yes. And it's almost shocking when you think about it, right? She has that opening line of "your foul stench." Yeah. Like who talks to somebody like Grant? Well, it's because they had a relationship and they've had many run-ins before and they don't like each other. So, So this is a personal thing for
it's the
for
ultimate
Tarkin.
FU here. I want to reference one more thing. The serial. Yes. It was horrible. And you know what the sad part is? I think I might have a sequel. I'm just deciding if I want to do it or not. So be on the lookout for expired old Star Wars serial part 2, maybe coming to a galaxy near you soon.
Yeah. All right. I'm looking forward to that for sure. All right. Well, let's end it there. Thanks, you guys, for joining us. Hey, before we get out of here, about some shout outs to the people that joined us on the live stream tonight.
Yeah. Thank you for everyone who joined us tonight. Music Train 1, Alex, my girl Paisley, Only Vader's Girl, Qui-Gon J, 2944, Rita Reborn, One Up versus CPU 64, and Riley 268. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on this live stream.
Yep. Thank you. And don't forget, we'll be back on Tuesday to cover another comic book series. I think we're 2 issues. Is it 2 issues now? I think we're 2 issues in on Echoes of the Empire. The 3rd issue will be coming out this Wednesday, the 24th, but we won't cover that one right now. But we were sitting on the first 2. We'll cover those 2 on Tuesday night. And then this Sunday, we'll pick up on the Mandalorian and Grogu episodes. That'll be the Hutts and Hunters. So talking about the bad guys, if you will, from the Mandalorian and Grogu. And if you have questions to enter or to send over to us, please send them. We'll pick a winner before we go on air and hand out another one of the posters for the Mandalorian Grogu. So we've got at least 1 or 2, maybe even 3 episodes left on that series, and then we'll transition to something else. But please join us for that public show. Tuesday will be a Patreon show. Next Sunday will be a public show. Okay. Chris, anything else? Final words, final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, this was a great retrospective on old Sheev on Father's Day. Anyone out there who is a father or a father figure to anyone, I want to wish you a happy Father's Day, and hopefully you have many more.
Yeah, same thing. So, all right, guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you guys here on the next episode.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.